And if I told you that Lewis Hamilton could be about to star in one of the most incredible returns in the history of Formula One, and that it all started with almost hidden telemetric data in Silverstone's training? What happened in those first laps of practice not only surprised Ferrari, but is making all the rivals nervous. Silverstone, the cradle of British motoring, not only represents a temple for Formula One. For Lewis Hamilton, it is almost a personal altar. There everything began. It was in this circuit where he marked his first milestones, and where his emotional connection with the public and the layout reaches an unmatched intensity. Therefore, when the 2025 calendar brought it back home, the expectation was not simply high, it was monumental. Each step, each curve, each appearance in the pits was observed with magnifying glass. And not only for their fans, but for the skeptics, for the detractors, and above all, by the rivals who hoped to see if the mythical Hamilton was still able to make a difference in a totally new environment. That initial disconnection with the Italian car lit the alarms among the tifosi. The speech that Hamilton and Ferrari would be unstoppable began to become uncomfortable questions. Was this an emotional decision rather than rational? Was Hamilton really prepared to reconfigure his way of piloting after so many years with a different philosophy? The media pressure climbed and the patience, both of fans and critics, began to run out. Behind that training session there were not only data, there was a narrative that was woven between each meter of track. Each sector represented a part of the emotional and technical puzzle that Hamilton needed to solve. And when he appeared to the front in the timetable, ahead of the McLaren, his own companion Leclerc, and the Red Bull, it was not just a Good Friday, it was a sign. A silent warning that the British legend had aroused. And he had done it precisely where he was always more lethal. At home. In Silverstone. The data, when analyzed precisely, do not lie. And in the case of Lewis Hamilton in Silverstone 2025, they reveal a deep technical transformation that can have real consequences in the development of the championship. Behind the time of 1:26,892 with which he led the first free training session, a story of adaptation, surgical precision, and behavioral evolution was hidden. Because Hamilton was not only fast, it was clinically efficient. And that is what most surprised Maranello's engineers. The detailed telemetric analysis showed that Hamilton was able to stop between 3 and 4 meters later than his partner Charles Leclerc at various critical points of the path, particularly in curves 3 and 6. But the really shocking thing was not that differential, but the fact that he achieved it without causing survival, without compromising the balance of the car. Any pilot can try to stop later. What very few can do even at the elite level is to do it in a sustained way without altering the behavior of the car. That is the difference between attacking a curve with aggressiveness and mastering it with mastery. And Hamilton did it repeatedly, back after return. Beyond the brakes, another fact powerfully caught the attention. The 11% reduction in the variability of the steering wheel inputs. Translated into human language, that means that the British pilot needed less corrections to maintain the optimal trajectory of the car in the second sector, which is where high-speed curves are combined with very sensitive transitions. This type of stability in the direction is the result of a fluid communication between the car and the pilot. A synergy that until now seemed distant for Hamilton and Ferrari. In previous sessions of the championship, its handling was more reactive. It adjusted in real time, seeking to understand the car. In Silverstone that changed. Now the car responded to its intentions almost instantaneously. It is not only a symptom of trust, but of real connection with the machine. This precision also implies that the wear and tear of the tires can be reduced, that the car's energy management is optimized, and that the strategic decisions of the equipment can rely on a pilot who not only goes fast, but is comfortable. This also translates into less mental wear. When a pilot has to constantly compensate for the defects of his car, cognitive fatigue increases. Hamilton, on the contrary, transmitted calm. The data showed it and the cameras confirmed it. Their body and style were a balance of balance. Less corrections also means less unforeseen weight transfers, which improves the general efficiency of the SF-25. With these data, the narrative that pointed to instill disoriented Hamilton is dismantled. Not only has he adapted, he is starting to dominate. And he is doing it at the right time, in the perfect circuit, and with a car that, after the improvements of Austria, finally begins to respond. Silverstone was not just one more session. It was the turning point that can alter the entire dynamics of the 2025 championship. Ferrari arrived in Silverstone with a backpack full of expectations and a series of technical improvements that, until that moment, had generated more questions than answers. It was in the Austria Grand Prix where Maranello's team presented a new aerodynamic package mainly focused on the SF-25 floor redesign. At that time, many saw it as a conservative update, a containment maneuver in the middle of an increasingly demanding fight against McLaren and Mercedes. But Silverstone, with its fast, fluid and highly aerodynamic layout, showed that the Italian team had played its letters with more intelligence than it appeared. The new floor of the SF-25, far from being a superficial modification, completely transformed the behavior of the car into conditions of high lateral load. This component, essential for airflow control under the car and therefore for the soil effect, offered a fundamental change, expanded the car operating window. What does this mean? That the pilots were able to work with more extreme suspension and aerodynamic configurations without losing stability or traction. And on a track like Silverstone, where high-speed direction changes put adherence to the limit, that makes a critical difference. Frédéric Vasseur, head of the team, confirmed that these improvements were not only positive, but also exceeded expectations. The car won braking stability, traction in the exit of long curves such as Copse and Stowe, and a better response in transition areas such as Maggots-Beckett's. The SF-25 began to behave as a solid platform, allowing its pilots to explore limits that were previously out of reach. In this context, Hamilton's performance gained even more value, because it was not only brilliant piloting, but a synergy with a car that now responds to its style. In turn, Charles Leclerc also showed signs of recovery. Although his rhythm did not match that of his British partner, he finished second in the FP2, only 2/10 from Lando Norris. A clear sign that the car's performance was not accidental or exclusive to a unique configuration for Hamilton. The car was simply working better for both. Another relevant technical detail is the improvement in the thermal dissipation of SF-25. Under conditions such as Silverstone, where temperatures can fluctuate sharply due to the nature of the British climate, Ferrari showed that its cooling system had also evolved. This allowed to maintain an optimal operation window in critical components such as the MGUH and the MGUK of the hybrid system, optimizing the recovery and deployment of energy. In addition, with the stability gained, Ferrari could further refine the motor map without compromising reliability, which gave them an extra performance in the lines without having to sacrifice grip in quick curves. In other words, the car became more versatile, more predictable, and more efficient. Three characteristics that do not usually appear together in a technical package until the season well advanced. Silverstone was not just a good day for Ferrari. It was the time when their engineers, their simulations, and their strategic commitment began to give tangible results. And if this level of performance is maintained or even increases in the next circuits, then Ferrari can dream again. No longer with isolated podiums or good Saturdays, but with a real fight for the championship. Lewis Hamilton has always been a pilot who transforms fuel pressure, and in Silverstone made it clear that his ability to reinvent himself is still intact. Throughout his years in Formula One, he has proven to be much more than a fast pilot. It is a competitor who understands motor racing in layers, the technical, the psychological, the strategic aspect. And that is exactly what began to separate it from his teammate and the rest of the grid on the weekend of the Grand Prix of Great Britain. While Charles Leclerc had to deal with certain levels of discomfort regarding the behavior of the SF-25, especially in the transition between fast curves, and Hamilton half showed an overflowing confidence. That difference became visible not only in the chronos, but in the body language of both inside and outside the car. Leclerc still seems to depend on the car to shine. Hamilton, on the other hand, is beginning to shape it in its style, adapting it centimeter to centimeter to what you need to feel invincible. Ferrari, meanwhile, begins to understand what he really has in his hands. It is no longer just the talent of Leclerc or the technical improvements of the SF-25. Now they have a pilot that can absorb all that information, refine it, and return it in the form of results. That transforms Hamilton into more than a sports asset. It is an extension of the technical department on the track. A performance amplifier that, if it remains motivated and backed by a solid structure, can make a difference in a struggle for the title that this year is more open than ever. It's not about speculating with hope. It's about observing data, gestures, decisions. Hamilton is not only returning to his best level. It is redrawing the competitive map of the 2025 season. The data does not lie. Telemetric precision, curve stability, the reduction of corrections at the wheel, sustained performance without overheating, are all indicators that Hamilton is entering an area of technical and emotional domain. And that type of performance does not appear by accident. What remains now is asking, was Silverstone an isolated spark or the beginning of combustion that can set the championship on fire? The next circuits will offer us that answer. But the truth is that the paddock does not observe Hamilton with the look of the one who waits for his retirement. Now they look at him as a real threat. As a contender who has deciphered the technical enigma of his Ferrari and that, if the car allows it, he has everything to fight again for the world title? And this is where you enter. Do you think Hamilton can maintain this level of performance? Will Ferrari be able to sustain the evolution of SF-25 to continue being competitive in circuits with such different characteristics? Hungary? I want to read you. Share your opinion.